All right, so today we're looking into some pretty intense stuff, those immigration raids planned in Chicago right after Trump's inauguration.
Yeah, Monday.
Yeah, Monday, exactly.
And you've sent a ton of stuff over, articles, community resources, even some personal notes.
Yeah?
It seems like you're really trying to get a handle on this.
Oh, well, that's a lot.
And who wouldn't be?
I mean,
This is really happening.
yeah, and it's like happening now.
Yeah, it is.
Like these raids could start.
Yeah, within days. And that press conference at Dominican University with community leaders
Oh, really?
was just this morning, Saturday the 18th.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it is really a whirlwind. I'm seeing headlines about President-elect Trump saying mass deportations will begin very quickly after Monday. And then I'm reading about Tom Homan, his pick for immigration enforcement, specifically naming Chicago
Right.
as like the starting point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's unsettling.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how Chicago keeps getting singled out. You know, maybe it's because of the city's history as a sanctuary city, a place that's resisted federal immigration enforcement and tried to protect its immigrant communities.
Right, like that quote from Congressman Jesus Choi Garcia. It's no secret that the new administration wants to target Chicago. They want to intimidate a city that would stand up for justice and protection for everyone. But how much power does a sanctuary city actually have to push back against federal actions?
Yeah, it's a big question. It's a complex legal area, you know, with different interpretations of how federal and local laws interact. But basically, sanctuary city policies often limit cooperation with federal immigration authorities, especially when it comes to detaining people just based on their immigration status.
So it's like a tug of war between the city wanting to protect its residents and the federal government trying to enforce immigration laws.
Exactly. And this tension is playing out right now in the context of these planned raids. And it's no coincidence that Trump and Homan keep emphasizing their focus on deporting undocumented immigrants with criminal backgrounds.
Okay.
But the language gets really murky.
That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about criminal aliens, but what does that actually mean? Could someone with a minor offense years ago be targeted?
I mean, that's the unsettling part. You know, Trump himself has said we have to get the criminals out of our country, but he hasn't given specific criteria. So yeah, that vagueness creates a lot of anxiety.
No kidding. It makes it hard for people to feel safe.
Absolutely.
If they don't even know what might trigger action.
Absolutely. And this is where the community's response becomes so important.
Okay.
They're not waiting around for things to happen. They're actively trying to prepare and empower people.
Well, that press conference at Dominican University really struck me.
Yeah.
All those people holding signs like, remain silent and know your rights.
Right.
It felt like a scene from a movie, but this is real life for so many people.
Yeah. And Erendira Rendon, one of the community leaders, she had a clear message: don't panic, prepare. She's urging people to understand their rights, have a plan, and utilize resources like the Resurrection Project.
Okay.
They have a website, itij.org, with Know Your Rights materials and even emergency family plan documents.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's like they're saying, we might not be able to stop the rage, but we can make sure people are informed and empowered. But I'm seeing some conflicting information here. The Associated Press is reporting that over 300 people with histories of egregious violent crimes will be targeted in Chicago. But then we have Trump talking about removing criminals without defining it.
Right.
How do those two things fit together?
That's a great question, and it really highlights the need to understand your rights.
Okay.
Even if someone has a criminal record, they still have constitutional rights regardless of their immigration status.
Okay.
And that's something that Christina Rodriguez, a Yale law professor, keeps emphasizing.
So even in this high-pressure situation, people need to know they're not completely powerless.
Exactly.
They have legal protections.
Exactly. And there are specific rights that are particularly important in the context of these raids.
Okay, let's unpack that. What are the crucial things people need to know if ICE agents come knocking?
The most important thing is that you have the right to remain silent.
Okay.
You don't have to answer any questions from ICE agents.
Got it.
You don't have to open your door unless they have a judicial warrant signed by a judge.
But a judicial warrant? What's the difference between that and an administrative warrant from an immigration agency?
Yeah, that's a critical distinction.
Okay.
A judicial warrant allows law enforcement to enter your home.
Okay.
However, an administrative warrant from ICE does not give them the legal right to enter your home without your consent.
So just because someone flashes a badge and a piece of paper doesn't mean you have to let them in?
Not at all.
Yeah.
You have the right to ask to see the warrant, to verify its validity, and to consult with an attorney. And speaking of attorneys, you have the right to speak to one before answering any questions or signing any documents.
If there's one thing listeners take away from this deep dive, it should be that know your rights, people. Don't be afraid to assert them, and don't hesitate to seek legal counsel. The Resurrection Project has those Know Your Rights materials on their website, and I'd urge everyone to download and print them right now.
Yeah, it's always better to be prepared. But even with all this talk about raids and individual rights, we can't forget about the bigger picture here.
Okay.
Trump's executive orders could reshape immigration policy on a much larger scale.
You're right. We focused on this immediate threat, but those executive orders loom large.
Yeah.
And from what I'm reading, they could touch on everything from border security to visa programs to enforcement priorities. What are you seeing in terms of potential impacts?
What's fascinating is how these executive orders could potentially create a ripple effect. They could impact people far beyond those directly targeted in the raids.
Right.
We need to dig into that more.
Absolutely. Let's explore that in more detail after a quick word from our sponsor. All right, we're back. And I think ready to look into these executive orders you mentioned. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed by all the possibilities that could affect so many aspects of immigration.
Yeah, it's like trying to predict the weather weeks in advance. There are so many variables, but what we do know is that executive orders can have a powerful impact, often bypassing the usual legislative process.
Yeah, and when it comes to immigration, those impacts can be felt across the board, right?
Yeah.
Everything from border security measures to how visas are processed to who gets prioritized for deportation.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that these orders aren't set in stone. They can be challenged in court, and their long-term effects might not always be what was initially intended.
But even the threat of these orders, the uncertainty they create, can have a real impact on people's lives.
Absolutely. Imagine the stress of not knowing if your visa will be renewed or if your family member might be targeted for deportation based on new criteria. It's a heavy burden to carry.
I'm also thinking about the City Council's decision to table that amendment to the Sanctuary City Ordinance. It seemed like a chance to strengthen protections for immigrants, but they put it on hold.
It's a complex issue, and there are definitely strong opinions on both sides. Some argue that the amendment as written wouldn't have provided meaningful protection and might have even created a false sense of security.
I could see that perspective.
Yeah.
But others see it as a betrayal, a failure to stand up for the most vulnerable members of the community when they need it most.
It's important to acknowledge both viewpoints, and it's crucial to understand that the decision has real-world consequences. Leaving the existing ordinance as is could limit the city's ability to resist federal enforcement actions, especially in the context of these impending raids.
So we've got this tension between the city trying to protect its residents and the federal government pushing its immigration agenda. It feels like a lot of people are caught in the middle.
That's a good way to put it, and this is where the work of organizations like the Resurrection Project becomes so critical. They're providing resources, legal guidance, and emotional support to help people navigate this complex and stressful landscape.
Right. And they're emphasizing the importance of knowing your rights, even if you're undocumented.
Yeah.
Can we go back to that for a moment? It feels like a lifeline for people who are scared and unsure of what to do.
Absolutely. Let's reiterate those key points. Remember, you have the right to remain silent. You don't have to answer any questions from ICE agents, regardless of your immigration status.
And even if they come knocking on your door, you don't have to open it unless they have a judicial warrant signed by a judge. That part seems really important to emphasize.
It is. A lot of people mistakenly believe that any warrant is enough to force entry, but that's simply not true. An administrative warrant from ICE doesn't give them the legal right to enter your home without your consent.
So knowing the difference between a judicial warrant and an administrative warrant could be crucial in protecting yourself and your family.
Exactly. And if ICE agents do come to your door, it's essential to remain calm. Clearly state your rights and request to speak to an attorney. Don't sign anything without legal counsel.
That's sound advice. I'm thinking back to that press conference at Dominican University. All those signs urging people to remain silent and know your rights. It's clear that the community is taking these warnings seriously, and they're trying to spread the word as far and wide as possible.
Yeah, it's empowering to see people taking action, not just reacting to fear. They're gathering information, sharing resources, and supporting each other.
Yeah.
And that sense of community strength is something to hold on to, even in the face of uncertainty.
I'm also noticing a theme of resilience in the articles you sent. It seems like people are determined to fight for their rights and for their communities, even if the odds feel stacked against them.
That spirit of resilience is so important. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the potential for sweeping changes. but it's crucial to remember that people have power even in seemingly powerless situations. They can stay informed, connect with support networks, and advocate for change.
This whole situation really highlights the complexities of immigration policy. It's not just black and white. There's so many shades of gray, so many individual stories and circumstances that get lost in the political rhetoric.
It's crucial to remember that we're talking about human beings here. Families, friends, neighbors, not just abstract concepts or statistics. Their lives, their dreams, their futures are at stake.
And their contributions to our society. I'm seeing articles about the economic impact of immigrants, the vital roles they play in our workforce and our communities. These aren't just faceless aliens. They're people who are woven into the fabric of our nation.
It's a perspective that often gets overlooked in the heated debates about immigration. But it's a perspective that needs to be amplified, especially in times like these when fear and division can easily take hold.
So we've got these executive orders looming the potential for increased enforcement actions and a lot of uncertainty about what the future holds. It can be tempting to just shut down and ignore it all, but I think that's the worst thing we can do.
I agree. Knowledge is power. The more we understand the situation, the better equipped we are to navigate it, to support those who are most vulnerable, and to advocate for just and humane policies.
It's a reminder that we can't just be passive observers. We have to engage to stay informed and to use our voices to challenge injustice and promote understanding.
And we need to be mindful of the language we use. Terms like illegal alien can dehumanize and create a sense of otherness. It's important to remember that we're talking about people, individuals with their own stories and experiences.
You're right. Words matter, especially in a climate where fear and prejudice can easily spread. We need to be thoughtful and intentional about how we talk about these issues, both in public and in private.
It's about fostering empathy and understanding rather than perpetuating stereotypes and division.
I'm feeling a renewed sense of purpose after this conversation. It's easy to get caught up in the fear and uncertainty, but it's crucial to remember that we can make a difference even in small ways.
Absolutely. Every act of kindness, every voice raised in support of justice, every effort to educate ourselves and others contributes to a more just and welcoming world.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, there's one more thing I want to touch on. The potential psychological impact of all this stress and uncertainty. I'm seeing articles about the rise in anxiety and depression among immigrant communities, especially children who are witnessing their parents' fear and worry.
That's a crucial point. The emotional toll of living under constant threat of deportation or family separation can be immense.
And it's not just about the immediate threat. It's about the long-term effects of trauma and chronic stress. We need to be mindful of the mental health needs of immigrant communities and ensure that resources and support are available.
Absolutely. Mental health is just as important as physical health, and it's often overlooked in these situations. Organizations like the Resurrection Project are doing great work to provide counseling and support services, but more needs to be done to address the psychological impact of these policies.
It's a reminder that this isn't just about legal battles and political debates. It's about people's lives, their well-being, their sense of safety and belonging. We need to approach this issue with compassion and understanding, recognizing the human cost of these policies.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. What are your final thoughts for our listener?
Yeah, it does feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
A really complex issue, but I think we've given our listeners a good foundation to understand what's going on in Chicago and to think about how these immigration policy changes could impact things more broadly.
Yeah, I agree. We've explored a lot. The looming threat of the raids, the legal complexities of sanctuary cities, the potential impact of executive orders, the importance of knowing your rights, and the need for community support and resilience.
Yeah, you've definitely given me a lot to think about, especially those executive orders. It's like this huge question mark hanging over everything.
And that uncertainty is part of what makes this so challenging. We can analyze the potential impacts, but the truth is we won't know the full extent of these policy changes until they're implemented and start to actually play out.
But even with all this uncertainty, I'm feeling more empowered than overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Knowing your rights, having a plan, connecting with resources like the Resurrection Project. These are all steps you can take to feel more in control.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone in this.
Right.
There's a whole community of people who are facing similar challenges, and there are organizations working tirelessly to provide support and guidance.
I keep thinking about that quote from Congressman Garcia about Chicago standing up for justice and protection for everyone. It's a powerful reminder that we can't just sit back and let these things happen. We have to speak out, to advocate for change, to support those who are most vulnerable.
And that can take many forms. It could be donating to organizations like the Resurrection Project, volunteering your time, contacting your elected officials, educating yourself and others about the issues, or simply offering a listening ear and a helping hand to those who are struggling.
Every action, big or small, contributes to a more just and welcoming society. And I think that's a hopeful note to end on.
I agree. This is a challenging time, but it's also a time for compassion, courage, and a renewed commitment to our shared values.
So to our listener out there, remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected. And never underestimate the power of your voice and your actions to make a difference.
And if you're feeling overwhelmed or unsure of where to turn, reach out to the Resurrection Project at treepiej.org. They have a wealth of resources and support services available, and they're ready to help.
We're all in this together. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.